You can eat your donut, we can still do this. Hey, it's me, your friend Shaun Proulx, and my hair is a mess, that's why I cut it off. But the good news is that we're gonna talk to this guy right here. You can even see how heavenly you look. I told you look heavenly. This is my friend Alexander.
Hi.
We're in New York. He lives here. Don't panic. Don't have a sex panic. We're sitting here talking, and you have done a lot of work in the sex industry.
I have.
You are sex.
I am sex.
And you said the term sex panic.
Sex panic.
What the hell? Have you heard that term? I have not heard that term. We're going through it. We're all having a sex panic.
Do I look at you or do I look at the phone?
What would you rather look at?
I'd rather look at you.
Okay, look at you.
Okay. There's not a lot of people who could do this with such stride as I do. I'm just letting you know.
I know.
And I'm really good at this.
You're very good at this. Sex panic.
A sex panic is what I would call a cultural reaction to a sex movement. So, I mean, with the advent of the internet and the readily availability of porn and the proliferation, am I even saying that right?
Yeah.
Proliferation of like websites and apps and the increasing visibility of the queer community, there's going to be a pushback. And I and a lot of people that I'm sort of connected with think that we're in one right now. And I guess what they're
So just a bit of background, sorry. I was telling my American friend about how we have that awful, horrible Doug Ford in Ontario, and what he's been up to. So he said, "Oh, it's a sex panic or something like that." So that's why we're having this conversation.
Do I keep talking? Okay, I'm gonna keep talking.
Talk to the plant if you want, dear.
Deal
Talk
with
whatever
you.
you want.
Is this your wine?
It is my wine, thank you.
Oh,
Cheers, darling.
Cheers.
I can ask for another glass if you want.
Yeah, that's really good. So, a sex panic makes me uncomfortable. It makes everybody I know uncomfortable, just because it starts small and the public never really notices it. And I don't believe we're going to be in a sex panic that's going to last 30 years, but I do think we're in a sex panic that's going to last for a little bit, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
I am not spending the last 30 years of my life in a panic over sex.
Well, then we have to fight it.
So how do we fight it?
Well, I don't know how things are in Canada, but I can say that here...
Grim.
Grim? Well, I can say that here we're seeing a more aggressive crackdown on social media of sex-related content that's not even explicit or erotic, but educational and healthy and informative. And the impact of that is that people don't have as easy access via the internet to vital sex education. Vital.
Are you still on camera or just managing?
It's still counting down. Yeah, the little numbers are still going. Yeah.
I have one word about sex panic. Tumblr.
Tumblr, and that's what my article was just about. Is I don't see the Tumblr crackdown as an isolated incident, but rather, and also Facebook just released its own guidelines and moderations that are much more heavy or sweeping than they were in the past.
Facebook always.
Always.
I was so impressed by
Facebook's
Tumblr
always
for
been
allowing
anti-queer.
liberal-
Yeah.
But now are you still listening?
Yeah, you're still
My
going.
arm is exhausted.
So it started with, actually, I can't sit here and say exactly what it started with, but it started with, or it's becoming a crackdown across social media on content that is both sex educational and sex positive and sex informative. And, what that ends up meaning is that we lose a lot of queer content and queer education. I mean, there's a lot of queer
Because
people who...
queers are the people who have moved anything to
the
do with
needle
sex forward.
on sex.
Yeah.
And the reality is that algorithms that flag for sex content are going to flag queer content because it's a community defined by our relationships.
Yes.
It's a community defined by our... I'm sorry, for some of us, especially for me, it's a community defined by my sex. I am a kinky, very sex-positive gay man who has engaged in sex work in the past. I don't know, it's a big part of my...
I know the best people.
What did you say?
I said I know the best people.
You know the best people. Oh, stop. And I don't know. I know that it's already hurting sex workers pretty heavily because the passage of FOSTA SESTA, which is kind of a bigger topic here. So last year, or maybe it was this year, the United States government and the president signed into law a legislation that holds platforms criminally liable for the content that users post.
You chose beautifully when you chose your president, I must say. Fuck.
It should have been whiskey or something. Take a shot before you start talking about Donald Trump.
But we don't have to have it.
Moving on. But actually, the reality is that FOSTA SESTA had bipartisan support. It had support across both parties because, and it shows that both parties aren't concerned about helping sex workers. So what FOSTA SESTA does is, I'm sort of switching between who I talk to. FOSTA SESTA.
They're one and the same.
I know, you are the cameraman. FOSTA SESTA criminalizes or creates a statute where platforms can be criminalized or fined for the content that their users post, at least more heavily than they were, and I want to make sure I'm simplifying this in a way that makes sense. It now means that since sex work is illegal in the United States, that language that appears to be sex work.
We're talking about sex, and you can keep it down, please.
Language that appears to be about sex work on platforms like Tumblr or, any number of social media platforms, if it looks like sex work, it gets an outright ban, or the platform runs the risk of being criminally sued.
So do you think that's behind the, and I'm going to come on the camera now because I'm pretty. Do you think it's the reason why, or one of the reasons why Tumblr shut itself down from posting the very content that saved it? Who went on Tumblr before there was sex? True.
I'm sorry, say that again. Do I think that that's behind Tumblr's shutdown?
Yeah.
I think that, well, yes, in part, but also I think that Tumblr is following a trend of corporate pushdown from larger corporations like Apple and Google to clean up their content because we're sort of in a movement in which sexual content is seen as threatening. And Sesta Fosta isn't necessarily the cause of that.
Sesta Fosta, I'll have a fresca.
So, Sesta Fosta isn't, this legislation that passed, it's not the cause of that, but it is exacerbating that problem. And just so you know, a lot of sex workers use Tumblr to cultivate their audiences, to post explicit content and find clients, and now they will be shut out. So they lose another platform online through which they can safely conduct business, which is going to force more and more sex workers out on the street, which, as we know, makes them much more liable to violence, rape, assault, and death. I mean, people will die because
Would you like to be violently raped or assaulted or die on your job? I don't think you would.
And it's legitimate work.
Oh, we're not having that conversation. If you don't think sex work is real work, unsubscribe. I want to just ask you one more quick question.